My heart pounded the night a dark sedan lingered outside my house, a silent warning from the man who had already forged my name and hurt my daughter. I felt the chill of fear, but decades of quiet strength kept my hands steady. I locked our evidence safe and called in every ally I had ready to face him in court and beyond. This was only the beginning of a fight that would test every ounce of resolve I'd built through years of sacrifice. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The San Antonio night pressed against my porch screens like warm breath. I parked beneath the pecan tree at 12:45 a.m., killed the engine, and let the silence test the street. 10 years a widow, 62, and retired, I still moved like a cop at closing time. Doors, checked windows, latched mind, counting the ordinary. Inside the living room kept the smell of lemon oil and old books. I set my keys in the little blue dish, left the lamp low, and sat to let the heat climb out of my bones. Fatigue softened the edges of the room. The clock on the mantel kept time like a patient metronome. I told myself 5 minutes, then bed. In my house order is a kindness. It says, "You did enough today." The house exhaled. Far off, a dog scolded whatever passed along the alley. A motorcycle stitched a thin line of sound across the highway and unraveled. The refrigerator hummed, then clicked. I listened because listening had saved me more than once. Most nights, the South Side settles into a workable truce with itself. Tonight it hesitated, as if the dark were holding its breath. I told myself I was chasing ghosts of habit and reached for the remote. I didn't turn the lamp off. A soft light makes a room honest. It lets you see what's really there. The first knock did not sound like a knock. It hit the door in a rush fist to glass a desperate staccato that shook the wood. My body stood before my mind finished the thought. I slid into the angle beside the window where I could see without being seen. Another burst. Between strikes, I heard a thin, unraveled breathing. My hand closed around the back of a dining chair weight. Not weapon, and I spoke through the door, low and even. "Who is it?" The answer came strangled and small and unmistakable. "Mom, please." I slid the chain and opened to the heavy heat. Isolde fell into me. For a beat, she was 7 again, all elbows and panic. Then the lamp reached her face and the years rushed back. The corner of her mouth had split, one eye pinched half shut. Her breathing was quick the way pain hurries the lungs. "It's okay," I said, because that word is a bridge you build for someone who can't yet walk. I got her to the sofa, tucked a pillow behind her shoulders, and let my hands do what training had taught. Look without staring. Listen without interrupting. Steady the room. Her fingers shook as if they hadn't decided whether to fight or flee. "He lost his temper," she whispered. "Over her. Over that woman." Shame pulled her gaze toward the rug. She searched for a place in the room that wasn't me, the lamp, the bookshelf, a loose thread on the cushion. I kept my voice quiet and ordinary. "Any dizziness, nausea? Can you take a deep breath for me?" She tried, winced, nodded. Finger-shaped shadows darkened her forearm. A faint red line showed above the collar of her blouse. She was not ready to say his name. I did not ask for it. A mother can know and still wait. I fetched a cool cloth and the old first aid tin from the hall. While I dabbed the blood at her lip, she apologized for the hour, then apologized for apologizing. The clock on the mantel sounded like it had moved closer. "We're going," I said, not a question. I helped her to her feet slow and sideways so the pain wouldn't spike, and grabbed my bag wallet insurance card, a small notebook, a pen, the folder I use for documents that matter. I locked the door behind us because I respect danger, and because respect is not the same thing as fear. Outside, the heat wrapped the car like wet wool. I eased her into the passenger seat and angled the air vent so the cold wouldn't slap her face. The Crown Vic started on the second try. I took Roosevelt to Military to the hospital because those roads hold their lines at night. The city kept its quiet bargains, one porch light here, a television window there. At a red light, she said, "Don't tell anyone." I gripped the wheel and kept my voice calm. "We're going to tell the people who can help." that's all." She pressed her lips together and watched the neon pharmacy sign slide past like a slow comet. The emergency entrance was a square of hard white in the dark. A nurse with a braided bun and a brisk kindness met us with a wheelchair. I answered questions while Isolde stared at the floor and refused to cry. Allergies, none. Blood thinners, no time. "Since the incident, less than an hour. Pain 1 to 10/6. If I don't move," she said. The resident listened to her chest and ordered imaging. He spoke the way good young doctors do, direct, gentle, unafraid of silence. They took her behind double doors, and I let them because there is a time for a mother to hover and a time to get out of the way. In the waiting area, I straightened a stack of magazines I would not read. The lights were unflattering and useful. They don't let you pretend. I wrote the time, the sequence, the words she had managed because details go slippery at 2 a.m., and I have learned to pin them down. I texted a trusted neighbor to watch my porch. I did not call my son. There are calls you make for company and calls you make for action, and I needed the second kind. When the nurse returned, she sat beside me, not across. It's a small mercy when people choose your side of the bench. "Bruising along the ribs," she said, "and we're watching for anything deeper. She's stable. We'll manage pain and keep her for a bit." I repeated it back step by step so the plan settled into place. I signed forms and thanked her. On my phone, a number I didn't have saved flashed and faded, then returned. I turned the screen face down. Tonight had already told us which truths belonged in the light. I walked to the restroom and washed my hands longer than necessary, listening to the water drum the basin. In the mirror, a woman I recognized looked back older, around the eyes, steady at the mouth. I dried my hands, squared my shoulders, and returned to the chair with my bag zipped. There are battles you fight with noise and battles you fight with paper. I have always been good with paper. The neon hospital light still burned in my mind as I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, knowing the night had only begun. ER doors parted and swallowed us into hard light and the smell of antiseptic. A nurse with a coffee-warm voice wheeled Isolde to a curtained bay while I gave her name, birth date, no allergies, tetanus up to date. I kept my tone even. Panic makes people sloppy, and sloppy costs time. In the bay, monitors woke stickers pressed to her skin with quiet snaps. Dr. Cambria Holt introduced herself in that brisk, midnight cadence, eyes kind and direct. "We'll manage pain check, imaging look for internal contusions," she said. Isolde flinched when the stethoscope touched her ribs. I asked for consent to photograph injuries for medical documentation. Cambria nodded. I lifted the phone and worked like a surveyor lip cheekbone wrist the bloom along the side that rose with each breath. I measured with a pen cap in my watch face, whispering timestamps. The room buzzed with the small dignity of competent people doing their jobs. I watched the oxygen numbers steady and felt my shoulders climb down a notch. Outside, the corridor hummed with wheels, voices, printers. Inside, it was just my girl and the low metronome of her pulse. The room dimmed after imaging the curtain breathing with every hallway draft. Isolde slept in ragged pockets, fingers curled near her collarbone. On the side table, her phone lit like a lighthouse, once then again rattling against the laminate. I turned it over. The preview line read, "Open your mouth and you lose everything." Then another, "Answer now." The name on the screen was Garrick Voss. The letters felt cold in the heat of that room. I slipped on gloves from the box, woke the phone, and let the messages cascade into still frames. Threats blame a photograph of their front door like a warning. I didn't react. I documented. I opened my own bag, pulled a clean micro SD and tiny adapter, and copied screenshots with the kind of patience I learned when evidence used to be film in little gray canisters. Backups secured. Redundant. Then I powered down her phone, popped the SIM with a paperclip, sealed it in an envelope, and slipped in a spare SIM I keep for bad nights. I added a note inside my Ledger Time device ID who handled what. By the time the phone restarted, the room had stilled. Machines breathed, my daughter did too. I set the phone to Do Not Disturb and slid it face down screen, dark as a pond at midnight. When the nurse dimmed the lights for imaging results, I moved to the family alcove by the ice machine and set my laptop on a fixed chair with a gouged arm. I plugged in the encrypted drive I keep in my wallet labeled only with a blue dot. Photos transferred in batches, each file name mirrored in my handwritten log. I recited the chain in my head like liturgy: who gathered, who stored, who touched, and when. I returned to the bay to find Isolde dozing, jaw unclenched at last. I brushed my thumb across her hairline the way I used to before grade school spelling tests. Her face was different now, woman, wife, almost mother, but the small child in her still reached for me in sleep. I sat and watched the rise and fall under the blanket and spoke softly to the dark, a promise I meant to keep. No more hiding. Not from him, not from the whispers, not from the papers. The monitor blinked green approval. I opened the camera again and photographed the time displays on each machine to anchor our timeline to hospital devices I didn't control. Then, because I knew how fear rewrites memory, I recorded a voice memo the hour who said what the details we'd be tempted to soften later. When I finished, I sealed the drive in an evidence bag from my home kit, signed the seam, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my jacket. My hands were steady. The wobble in my chest had become something colder and far more useful. I checked the drape again. Near 4, Cambria returned with scans, multiple soft tissue contusions, no organ damage observed, and follow up. Relief rose ankle deep and stopped. I signed for meds, asked for a social worker, and stepped into the hall to request extra patrols by our block. My phone lit with an unfamiliar county number. I nearly let it ring out, then answered. Mrs. Crowder, Romero Property Records. I shouldn't call, but a deed transfer with your name and Isolde's crossed my desk. It looks wrong. A transfer of what? Medina Creek parcel ending 742, executed yesterday. The signatures don't match prior filings. A note says, do not disturb, family handled. I wrote the instrument number on the back of a pharmacy handout. Who delivered it? Garrick Voss. My mouth went dry. We did not authorize any transfer. If you come at opening, I'll show you the jacket. Off the record, he said. Back in the room, the nurse checked a line. She asked if Isolde had someone at home. She has me, I said. I photographed the discharge header, copied bracelet numbers, and tucked the scribbled deed data into my envelope. Dawn bled through the blinds. I watched my daughter sleep and felt the anger harden. Not a flare, a blade. I would be patient and exact, and I would not warn a man like Garrick twice. I texted James Ellison, urgent forged deed meet records at 8. I sealed the bag, signed the seam, and logged the call with time and number. Old habits would keep us from being rewritten. Soon. I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon and opened the blinds to the pale wash of morning. San Antonio's heat was already gathering the sky the color of old porcelain. I set my bag on the dining table we use as a command post and laid out last night's work hospital bracelet stickers, discharge header, time-stamped photos, the envelope with Isolde's SIM. I powered my laptop and the encrypted drive entered the passphrase I could type asleep and began the slow, careful migration. Each folder had a plain name and a quiet purpose. ER images, threat texts, device metadata. I dragged files, verified checksums, and wrote the mirror entries in a small green ledger. People think resolve feels like thunder. For me, it feels like filing in straight lines. When the transfer's finished, I backed up to a second drive I keep in the freezer under peas. Belt and suspenders, my late husband would say. I paused by the sofa where Isolde slept with the dog at her feet, the towel-wrapped ice pack thawing to a damp ring. I didn't touch her. I adjusted the fan so it brushed her face and returned to the table, clicked open the camera app linked to Camilla's porch camera, and found the sliver of night when the world narrowed to my door. The feed showed my girl in frame hair, clinging shoulders, pitched forward, knocking with the urgency of a person running out of words. I felt the old alarm flare, then settle into its new form, a list: preserve, print, prepare. Camilla's porch smelled like mint and laundry soap. She'd set out 2 chipped mugs and a plastic tub of pan dulce, and the hum of cicadas already pressed the morning into a steady drone. Her hair was up her eyes, soft but sharp. I exported the clip to a thumb drive, she said, tapping her phone, and I wrote a short statement while it was fresh. She handed me the drive and a page torn from a spiral notebook, neat cursive with dates and times. I can testify she added steady as a church bell. If he comes around, he'll find me less friendly than the first time. I felt something loosen in my ribs I didn't know I was holding. Thank you, I said. I'll move Isolde to your spare room this week. Fewer eyes from the street. Camila nodded. I'll tell my nephew to park his truck at my curb tonight. Looks like a lazy guard dog, but he sees everything. We watched the neighborhood switch on sprinklers, garbage trucks, a boy on a bike wobbling around a pothole. And for a minute, I remembered the years when crises meant skinned knees and missing permission slips. Those were solvable by dinner. He threatened her by text, I said. Camilla's jaw set. Then the phone stays off and the neighbors stay loud. She covered my hand with hers, warm and matter-of-fact. You're not alone, Mary Beth. Hope is a small light, but it changes the room. I pocketed the drive and hugged her goodbye. The hug of women who have seen a few storms and learned which doors to bolt. The county records office opened to the smell of paper and old toner. Fluorescent lights hummed. The tile had a crack that ran like a river from the door to the front desk. Romero glanced up, saw me, and tilted his head toward a side office. He closed the door behind us and pulled a file jacket from a drawer, manila edges feathered by use. I can't hand this over, he said, but you can look. The deed inside was a familiar template, carrying unfamiliar ink, a grantor line with my name and Isolde's, a grantee line, Denise Salgado. The signatures were our names wearing someone else's shoes. When I asked. Yesterday afternoon, he said, pointing at a date-time stamp, courier delivered. The intake note reads, handled by Family Representative Garrick Voss. My mouth said, of course, and my hands took out a legal pad. I copied the instrument number, the parcel ID ending in 742, the notary seal number, the name of the notary whose commission I would be checking by lunchtime. Romero slid me a stack of photocopies he accidentally placed too near the edge. You didn't get those from me, he said. And I didn't tell you the notary's office has had complaints. I closed the folder and looked at him, the way you look at a neighbor who set your trash can upright in a storm. You did the right thing. He shrugged, eyes darting to the glass. The right thing gets heavy. I tucked the copies into a red wallet folder and took photos of the publicly viewable index on the wall dates book and page clerk. Initials anchors no one could erase. As I left, I passed a woman arguing at the cashier about a birth certificate. The clerk kept repeating, we need proof. Proof I thought is the only language systems speak. Fine, I would be fluent. I parked under the only crepe myrtle that still held shade and called James Ellison. He answered on the third ring, voice rough with morning and coffee. I gave him the headline, then the footnotes. Assault documented, I said. Threats documented. Forged deed to Denise Salgado, filed yesterday reference numbers in your inbox. Notary to be verified. I have video of Isolde arriving at my door at 1:02. James exhaled. We moved 2 tracks, he said. Protective order and criminal complaint for assault. Civil action to void the deed and enjoin further transfer. We'll file an ex parte TRO today to freeze that parcel. Good, I said. No warning to Garrick. None, he said. Also, a social worker will call you regarding safety planning. I want Isolde off the grid for a week if you can manage it. Camilla has a room, I said. Neighbors will keep watch. Send me the chain of custody notes as separate PDFs, he added. Judges like tidy. So do I. When I hung up, I sat in the car and let the silence spread until it reached the edges. Grief wanted to speak. I let it say one sentence. It shouldn't be your own who does this. Then I folded it up, placed it next to the anger I carry like a well-worn tool, and went home. The afternoon gathered heat and paperwork. I printed the ER summary, clipped it to my ledger copies, labeled everything with clean black letters. I scanned Camilla's statement signed to witness her signature and slid the thumb drive into an evidence sleeve. I photographed the notary seal on the forged deed photocopy and emailed it to James with the subject, Salgado Deed Seal Inquiry. Isolde stirred mid-afternoon eyes blinking at the light like a swimmer surfacing. "Where are we?" she asked. "Home," I said. "For now. Tonight you'll sleep at Camilla's." She swallowed, nodded once, then looked at my table, neat stacks, small labels, a map of our fight. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "You didn't do this," I answered. "You survived it. The rest is mine." She reached for my hand and I let her hold it until the dog nosed in between us with a sigh. I made soup the way my mother did when the world needed salting onion broth, a squeeze of lime at the end. We ate at the table, papers pushed back the ordinary ritual of spoons and napkins, reminding us we had not been turned into paperwork ourselves. After dishes, I called the non-emergency line and requested night patrol passes on our street. Then I stood at the safe in my bedroom closet and placed the day's work inside Drive copies, Ledger Camilla's Drive the red folder. I spun the dial, the old combination clicking like knuckles popping before a job. As dusk settled over San Antonio, I locked the evidence file in my safe and felt the weight of the coming battle pressing on my chest. The morning air carried a wet metallic scent that clung to my kitchen walls. I brewed coffee strong enough to jolt a statue, set out pain meds, and arranged a bowl of reheated soup on the nightstand beside Isolde. Her breathing stayed even, her cheeks flushed with the soft heat of healing. I checked each bandage and logged the timing on my phone, then slipped last night's photos, hospital records, and the copied threats into the fireproof safe. Before locking it, I sent a message to James Ellison, thanking him for the midnight guidance and confirming that he'd handed our case to senior counsel, Arthur Keene, who would shepherd the next legal steps. "Arthur's expecting you," James replied. "Stay vigilant." I set the phone aside, the tiny click of the safe a promise I intended to keep. By late morning, the Pearl Farmers Market pulsed with weekend chatter, a slow current of live music and the hiss of food stalls. I moved through the crowd with my list onion, celery, marrow bones, while a drizzle of side glances followed like a thin rain. I felt their murmurs gather a quiet static around the peaches and peppers. Then it struck Patty from Church Voice, carrying over the bluegrass band, said to a vendor, "She's milking this to take her son-in-law's money." The words hung above the clink of jars. Heat climbed my neck, but I didn't flinch. I noted the vendor's name, the time, the tilt of Patty's chin, all of it recorded in the silent ledger of a former cop. A child tugged his mother's sleeve, unaware that gossip can cut deeper than a knife. I paid for my produce and moved on the market suddenly louder, as if the crowd wanted to see if I would crack. Patty found me near the spice stall, the cinnamon scent masking her intent. Maybe if Isolde were a better wife. She began, eyes bright with the thrill of cruelty. I met her gaze steady as the badge I once wore. "Decency doesn't come with a ring," I said quietly. "It comes with restraint." Her lips parted, but I'd already turned, typing a quick message to Arthur Keene, potential defamation. "Witnesses, vendor, stall. 42:11:17 a.m. Please log statements and prep list." The send confirmation felt like a small gavel strike. I walked away, leaving her with the taste of unsaid words. The church courtyard offered shade and the low hum of doves. I sat on a stone bench called Captain Leora Dane and requested a courtesy patrol near my street. She agreed without hesitation, promising to coordinate with Vera Quist next door to pull porch cam backups. Before hanging up, I purchased a prepaid phone for Isolde and ordered an additional encrypted drive, double layering our defense. The fountain trickled behind me like a metronome for resolve. Back home, the house smelled of simmered broth. Isolde sat at the table, eyes red, as she scrolled a post that called her a schemer. A single tear marked the screen before she set it down. "They think I'm making it up," she whispered. "Let them think I said sliding a cup of tea her way. Truth doesn't need their permission." I guided her through the evening plan, emergency contacts, quiet exits, the order of protection we'd file at dawn. Her shoulders squared a fraction. It was enough. When night settled, I spread tomorrow's agenda across the counter, notarized statements, records office follow-up, and if Garrick dared to strut, meeting him on his own turf with Arthur Keene present. I labeled the new binder in clean black ink, Isolde do not erase. The letters looked like a boundary carved in stone. I slid the binder into the safe, the steel door shutting with a firm final note. By sundown, the market's whispers had hardened my patience into a blade. Tomorrow, I would bring it to Garrick's own counter. I packed the morning like a field kit. The evidence binder slid into my tote beside a slim recorder the size of a lipstick. I tested its lightless click with my thumb, then nested it into an inner pocket I'd lined with felt to muffle any noise. On the counter, I left a note with 3 numbers for Isolde Arthur's office, Captain Leora and Vera next door. Vera appeared at my back door with a casserole and the kind of concern that doesn't ask for thanks. I walked her through the safety plan one more time, curtains drawn, doors chained. Call me if a car idles too long. Isolde tried to say she should come along. I caught her hand. Your job is to heal, I said. Mine is to gather. In the hallway, I texted Arthur that I was running an errand and would forward material this afternoon. He replied with a single line I'd come to trust proceed but don't escalate. I locked the safe, looked once at my daughter's pale face, and stepped into the heat. Voss Pawn and Loan sat in a low strip of sun-faded awnings, its windows cluttered with guitars and lawn equipment that had outlived their owner's luck. A bell stuttered as I pushed in. The air smelled like oil dust and metal, a life bartered piece by piece. 2 security cameras blinked from opposite corners, cheap domes poised like lazy eyes. Garrick was behind the glass counter sleeves, rolled just enough to show he'd lifted things in his time but didn't now. He smirked when he saw me, the kind of grin a man wears when he thinks he holds your name on paper. I let the room soak in the narrow aisles, the mirror behind him that showed me the door, the cash drawer with a notch where the paint had chipped from use. Old habit mark exits, mark hands, mark tells. He tapped the counter with a knuckle, a soft drum beat, waiting to see if I'd flinch. Morning, I said. My voice took up the space it needed and no more. We should talk. About your talented daughter's performance, he asked, leaning back. I hear she's collecting sympathy like coupons. I didn't give him my anger, I gave him my stillness. We'll save the theater critique, I said. I'm here about theft and threats, specifically forged instruments and menacing communications. He laughed a short, ugly sound. Big words. You bring a dictionary or just that purse? He wanted me rattled. I set my tote on the counter like I was tired of its weight. Inside the recorder hummed to itself like a cricket in grass. You can mock, I said, or you can listen. A county clerk flagged irregularities on a deed transfer bearing my signature and my daughter's. We've certified copies. We've also preserved messages from your number that will read very poorly in front of a judge. Garrick's eyes slid to the camera's blind spot, then back to me. You think you know how this town works. His voice dropped half a key. What you have are copies of copies and a story. What I have are documents, originals, and witnesses who prefer my side of the street. He pulled open the cash drawer with a slam that cracked like a starter pistol. Coins rattled. Somewhere behind the wall, a compressor kicked on. I didn't blink. You're not the first man to mistake noise for power, I said, and you won't be the last who learns how paper trails breathe. He leaned forward, palms flat. You want to scare me with your retired badge tone? Go ahead. But you tell your girl if she opens that sweet mouth in court, she'll lose more than a story. I let a breath cycle through. You just threatened a victim on a recorded premise, I said calmly. And for your sake, I hope the originals you brag about aren't anything like the signatures you filed. Mine doesn't loop on the R. Hers never tilts right. You forged a memory you didn't live. His smirk wavered. Signatures drift under stress, he muttered. Not like that, I said, and not twice. A customer wandered in, then thought better of it and left. Garrick straightened the showman back. You know what? I have Mary Beth receipts, collateral logs, and a friend who's very fond of saying civil matter when a tired mother comes crying. He tilted his head. "Why don't you take your stew and go home? Because I'm not here to feed you," I said, letting the steel through. "I'm here to watch you lie to your own reflection." He laughed again, but it snagged this time. He turned to grab a pen and his elbow nudged a manila envelope out from a stack beneath the counter. It skidded, revealing a black marker scrawl my street number, followed by my last name. I glanced like it bored me, but my eyes mapped it. Craft paper creased twice heavier on the left. Ledger pages lay open under his hand loan numbers to one side, abbreviated descriptions to the other. HR bracelet 14K, generator runs, BLK safe scratch. The recorder drank it all without a burp. "I don't do crying," I said, keeping my tone level. "I do records and schedules. Which is why I'll be filing for a protective order at 9 sharp and hand-delivering these messages to the DA by noon. You think paper scares me?" he asked. "No," I said. "Only consequences do, but paper invites them in." He lifted the envelope as if to tidy, then thought better and tucked it behind the register. "Run along," then he said. "Tell your girl to practice her tears. Jurors like that. Jurors like evidence more," I said, "and patterns most of all." I left the shop at the same pace I'd entered. Outside heat shimmered against the asphalt and the hum of traffic turned steady as a choir. At the curb, I pretended to adjust my sandal and angled my phone past the front glass. 2 quick shots caught a sliver of the ledger and the corner of the envelope, just enough for Arthur to triangulate if we needed a warrant. Across the lot, a dented sedan idled with a man smoking in the shade, his gaze fixed on the pawnshop door. I stored the sight without reacting. License plate, bumper sticker, a cracked taillight like a missing tooth. My hands were steady when I gripped the wheel. At home, the kitchen smelled like thyme and something close to peace. I went straight to my small desk, transferred the audio to an encrypted folder, and emailed Arthur with a clean subject line, Voss recorded statements and photos, potential evidence. I listed Time's descriptions and the remarks verbatim. If she opens her mouth, she'll lose everything. Attached the 2 shots from the curb. I noted the envelope label, the angle of the ledger, the camera positions, and the slam of the drawer as a show of force. When I hit send, the room felt bigger. Isolde appeared in the doorway in a sweater she'd loved before all this. "How did it go?" she asked. "He performed," I said. "We curated." She swallowed. "Do we have enough?" "We have enough to begin," I said, which is all truth. Promises at first. I reheated soup, set her at the table, and typed out a timeline by hand. Arrival conversation threats, items observed, then scanned it and filed the original with our hard copies. I printed 2 discs with the audio, labeled them in my neat block letters, and sealed them in separate envelopes for Arthur and for Captain Leora. Redundancy isn't paranoia, it's love with a checklist. Before dusk, I walked the recorder back to the safe and stood for a moment listening to the quiet. A mother's instinct said Garrick wouldn't let today lie. A cop's instinct said he didn't know how to. I closed the metal door until the lock kissed home. In the living room, Isolde had dozed on the couch, the soup bowl empty and warm in her hands. I took it, gently brushed a strand of hair from her eyes, and felt my resolve settle like a cornerstone. I locked the recorder in my safe and knew Garrick would not stay quiet for long. His next move was already on its way. The house breathed like it finally remembered how. Afternoon light slid across my desk, turning paper edges to thin blades. I set the recorders back up in the safe labeled Today's Notes with the calm care of a librarian and refreshed the email thread to Arthur attachments, confirmed timestamps clean. Isolde napped in my room, the curtains pulled low, and the fan whispering a steady lullaby. I checked her phone, still powered off, SIM removed, and then my own. Odd, no spam calls, no neighborhood chatter. Even Vera's porch swing, usually creaking like a talkative ant, was still. Quiet can be a kindness. It can also be a held breath. The breath released all at once. My phone pinged, then vibrated like a shaken jar of bees. A former partner texted, "Are you seeing this?" A link followed to a neighborhood forum my name in bold, a photo of me outside the pawn shop, and a headline oiled to slide straight under the skin, "Retired cop uses connections to harass small business owner." Comments stacked like bricks. Someone claimed I flash badged in the shop I hadn't worn a badge in years. Another claimed I fabricated injuries to steal property my stomach turned. And a third insisted I was gunning for Garrick's livelihood with fake documents. Addresses were mentioned, including mine, pasted with a smug little map pin. Other pings a coworker from the precinct, "Call me if you need a statement." A church acquaintance forwarding a Facebook thread where my photo sat beside the word "liar" in cheap red letters. Whoever posted moved fast, like he'd pre-cut the wood and only needed a match. I breathed through the first wave, then began to gather. Screenshots, post comments, timestamps, the account names that smelled like burner profiles. Too new, too eager. I archived the pawnshop photo and its metadata, noting the angle. Likely captured from the idling sedan across the lot. Another text chimed an old friend from patrol days. "MB folks are saying you're abusing Leora's unit." I told them to sit down. Yet another, this one from a neighbor who preferred flowers to facts. "So much drama, why not let the courts decide?" I typed erased, then typed again. That's exactly what I'm doing. I stepped outside for air and heard my story walking ahead of me. Across the street, two women leaned together like bookends at Vera's fence. "Out for money," one whispered, "not low enough. She's always been intense." The word stung worse than the slur. A pickup rolled by. The driver glanced at me, then at his phone, then back at me, like he recognized the picture. I walked to the corner for milk and bread I didn't need. Inside the small grocery, a friend from Bible class lifted her hand, then let it drop to her cart handle, like it had gotten heavy. She smiled the careful smile people use when they don't want to pick a side. It would have hurt less if she'd simply turned away. The barista at the coffee shop had always remembered my order and my husband's, even after he was gone. Today, he looked past me to the next cup, then back, unsure which way kindness moved. At a table near the window, a man I didn't know declared to no one, "People think they're above the law once they retire." He wanted me to react. I let his words hang like shirts on a line, flapping and harmless, and paid cash. On the corkboard, someone had pinned a flyer for a community watch meeting, Protect Our Local Businesses. I almost laughed. I'd been protecting this neighborhood since some of these voices were learning to ride bikes. Back home, I moved like a metronome, hands steady steps measured, screenshots sorted by platform saved to 2 drives, links pasted into a timeline with a column for user IDs. I called Arthur, put the phone on speaker, and walked him through what I had. "They're seeding a story that I'm leveraging the department," I said. False statements republished across platforms with identifiable harm, reputational and safety. "Good," he said, meaning the record, not the lies. "Send me every capture. We'll draft a cease and desist to the original posters and prep a defamation claim. I'll also request preservation from the platforms before they scrub or edit. I want digital forensics," I said. "IP traces if we can, subpoena. The posts reference camera angles only Garrick's people or that sedan could have had." "I'll call Captain Dane," Arthur said. "Not to pull favors to split lanes. Civil for us, criminal for harassment and doxing if it applies." He knew me well enough to add quietly, "I've got your back, Mary Beth. But pace yourself. Pacing is how I win," I said, and felt the truth of it, right down to my shoes. I emailed Captain Leora with a clean summary, dates, times, posts, and a calm line requesting an incident number for the doxing, so patrol could keep a quiet eye on our block. She replied within minutes, "Logged." I flagged night units to pass by without lights. Also forward those screenshots to cyber. Don't engage online. Engage, I'd learned long ago that you don't argue with smoke. You wet the floorboards and check the wiring. Evening slid in on little cat feet. I warmed soup, set Isolde's meds in a saucer, and watched her face as she woke. "You look tired," she said, and guilt tried to climb into my lap. I told her about the posts in broad strokes, not the cutting phrases. She read my eyes anyway. "They're going to believe him," she whispered. "For a while," I said, "stories run faster than truth, but truth runs farther." We took our bowls to the porch, the sky a lavender band over the oaks, the cicadas tuned up. Across the street, Vera flicked on her porch light a lighthouse blink we'd agreed on if she saw anyone loitering. No blink tonight. A boy rode past on his bike singing to himself, oblivious to the big tides that move under small streets. I thought of all the women who had sat on porches like mine, steadying their hands on chipped railings while men spun yarn inside town squares. They survived with neighbors' notes and names written in neat lines. I had all three. I tucked Isolde in, the way I had when she was 5. Soft socks, fresh water, within reach the book she wasn't ready to read, yet turned face down. In the living room, I gathered the binder slid in today's captures. Behind a tab, I labeled with a black marker, "Smear do not erase." I added a list of potential witnesses who had seen the posts appear in real time. It calmed me, the order of it, like folding laundry straight from the line before the day could smudge it. On the porch again, the night finally admitted its stars. Cars whispered on the highway, a river I'd learned to hear more than see. I let my anger settle into its proper shape, not a shout, not a knife, but a weight I could carry up courthouse steps. Garrick thought he could write me into his story like a villain with an old badge and a new appetite. He didn't understand I don't chase spotlights. I build cases. I don't break doors. I knock, and the law answers with me. Under the starlit Texas sky, I tightened my grip on the evidence binder, ready for the next move in Garrick's reckless game. I parked a block from El Corazon Rojo and breathed in the warm night. My purse held a tiny recorder and a spare phone battery. Before stepping out, I texted Arthur Keene a brief note, meeting potential witness. Stand by. No location, just a quiet alert. I adjusted a plain denim jacket over a neutral blouse, willing my heartbeat to slow. Tonight had to stay controlled. The bar's neon sign flickered like a heartbeat, casting a red glow over the cracked sidewalk. Inside, smoke and tequila laced the air. I spotted Celine, immediately tall, silver blonde hair, swept high posture like a dancer holding a secret. She gave a half smile that never reached her eyes. I ordered club soda and joined her booth, noting the sticky tabletop and the rhythm of a blues guitar. "Thanks for coming," I said, voice low. "I don't bite." Selena's reply carried a trace of defiance. "I'm not here for small talk." "Then let's not waste time," I said. "You know why I asked?" Her gaze flicked to the door, then back to me. "Garrick's worse than you think." I let the silence stretch until she continued. Words spilled out his jealous rages, cash stashed in false drawers threats, when she questioned his forged deed scheme. She slid her phone across the table screen lit with messages full of intimidation and late-night bragging about owning that house soon. "Will you testify?" I asked, careful to keep my voice steady. "I'm tired of being his excuse," she whispered. "Yes, I'll help." I thumb-scrolled quickly, forwarding screenshots to a secure cloud and my encrypted drive. The tiny recorder in my pocket blinked a steady green, catching every word. We sat in a pocket of uneasy quiet while the band shifted to a slower tune. When Selene finally rose, she met my eyes squarely. "He won't forgive this," she said. "I'm counting on it," I answered. Outside, humid air wrapped around me, thick with gasoline and late summer flowers. The streetlight buzzed, throwing halos on wet pavement. I paused, replaying Celine's confession in my mind. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was leverage. Clean, undeniable leverage. Garrick's foundation had a crack, and I intended to drive a legal wedge through it. I walked to my car without hurry, the recorder safe in my bag, and new evidence in the cloud. For the first time in days, a cautious hope settled beside the constant vigilance. I stepped into the humid night. Selene's words replaying in my mind, proof enough to bring Garrick to his knees. The first light of dawn filtered through my kitchen blinds as I laid each document in precise order. Photos of Isolde's bruises, Celine's text screenshots, and the audio recorder all slid into a labeled binder. I checked every page twice, then poured black coffee into a travel mug. "We're ready," I told Isolde, touching her shoulder. Her quiet nod steadied me more than any pep talk. By 7, I met Arthur Keene on the courthouse steps, his leather briefcase already bulging with duplicates. The cool stone beneath my palm felt like a promise today the truth would breathe. Inside the Bexar County Courthouse, the marble gleamed under vaulted ceilings. Low murmurs echoed off polished walls as we approached courtroom 3. I kept my gaze forward when Garrick swaggered in a practiced smirk spread across his face. He wore a charcoal suit, but his eyes searched the room like a cornered animal. I inhaled slowly, rehearsing testimony lines as if they were steps in a dance dates times evidence chain. Behind us, Cellini slipped into the gallery sunglasses, hiding a silent courage. When the judge called our case, Arthur rose with calm precision. The first exhibits appeared on the large-screen hospital photos, followed by the sharp audio from my recorder Garrick's own threats, vibrating through the speakers. Celine took the stand, next voice clear, despite trembling hands recounting the night he struck Isolde and bragged about the forged deed. Gasps rippled through the spectators as she read his text, "Open your mouth and you lose everything." Garrick's jaw twitched, a hairline crack in his composure. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a fierce, righteous anger. Garrick's lawyer leapt to discredit us, pressing hard on every detail. I answered evenly, drawing on years of police testimony. Dates, times, and evidence chain never wavered. When Isolde spoke briefly, soft but steady, the courtroom seemed to lean forward as one. The defense faltered their objections, thinning like smoke. The judge reviewed the exhibits in deliberate silence. Finally, the gavel struck once, echoing like a drumbeat of justice. Protective order granted. Assets frozen pending fraud investigation. A murmur of relief swept the room. I reached for Isolde's hand, feeling the tremor of release pass between us. Arthur squeezed my shoulder, a silent, "well done." As we stepped into the hallway, sunlight poured through the tall windows. Garrick stood rigid near the exit eyes, burning with unspoken threat. I met his gaze without flinching. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears, a reminder that the battle wasn't finished, but today the truth had finally spoken. The courthouse hallway felt cooler than the courtroom, as if the building itself had exhaled. I steadied Isolde with a hand on her shoulder, while Arthur Keene flipped through a stack of freshly signed orders. Relief brushed me, but I held it at arm's length. "Protective order is immediate," Arthur said. "Asset freeze is in motion. We'll collect certified copies before they close." His voice carried the clipped precision I trusted. I sent a quick text to Captain Leora Dane, "Protective order granted. Implement night safety plan." A faint vibration from her reply. On it echoed like a checkpoint on a long map. At the clerk's window, the smell of paper and toner mixed with the sharp tang of ink. We waited beneath fluorescent lights while a young clerk stamped seals onto each document. I traced the judge's initials beside the file numbers, every stroke a small victory. Isolde leaned into me, her breathing steadier than this morning. "These are more than papers," I whispered. "They bite back." The clerk slid the certified copies across the counter, their embossed edges catching the light like quiet weapons. Next came the administrative sprint. Arthur led a conference call with bank compliance officers, while I scanned and emailed every evidentiary exhibit. On speaker, a branch manager confirmed that Garrick's accounts were locked pending investigation. The metallic click of a notary's stamp punctuated our success. At the county recorder's office, a supervisor flagged the forged deed and attached a fraud notice to our parcel. No transfers without in-person verification, she promised, handing me a copy for my file. By dusk, we shifted to defense. Captain Leora arranged evening drive-bys on our block. Neighbor Vera Quist promised to keep her porch camera rolling. Back home, I handed Isolde a prepaid phone and outlined a safe word system for emergencies. She nodded, eyes tired but luminous, and set the phone on the nightstand like a shield. I programmed a 2-household check-in routine, my mind ticking through contingencies as the cicadas began their evening chorus. Celine arrived quietly, a hood drawn over her hair. Arthur met her at the side door and guided her to the dining table, where evidence folders waited. She handed over a final thread of Garrick's messages and accepted a small envelope keys to a short-term rental Arthur had arranged under counsel's name. I offered a spare charger and a packet of food vouchers. "Thank you," she murmured, voice frayed but firm. "He won't find me." The final step came with a single phone call. The process server reported that Garrick had been officially served. "Hostile stare, no words," he said, noting the time and location. I logged it in our running case file and closed the notebook with a decisive snap. Later, I settled on the porch with coffee that had long gone cold. The humid Texas night pressed close thick with the chirr of cicadas. Paper only works because people choose to honor it, I thought, and Garrick never honored anything. I watched the dark street beyond the pecan trees, ready for whatever ignored the ink's command. The sun was only a memory when I first noticed the dark sedan idling at the intersection beyond the pecan trees. Its engine purred a low mechanical growl against the chorus of cicadas. From my porch chair, I logged the time, 9:11 p.m., and caught a partial plate under the flickering streetlight. I kept the house dark phone screen dimmed and sent a single text to Captain Leora Suspicious Vehicle Corner of Del Mar and 7th. No movement yet. My pulse beat a steady count, the rhythm of long nights on patrol years ago. I slipped inside and motioned to Isolde. "Shoes on. We're going next door." She didn't ask why. She knew. We crossed the damp lawn, keeping to the shadowed side of the hedge until Vera's porch light warmed our path. "Safe word," I whispered. "Juniper." She answered firm enough to steady us both. Vera opened her door before we knocked, phone in hand, porch camera blinking. Inside, she said, voice clipped but calm. Halfway through a mug of hastily brewed tea, a sharp rustle pulled my attention to the alley. Two men emerged from the dark like careless ghosts. One bent and dropped a folded sheet onto the gravel, then stepped back without a word. The other's face stayed hidden beneath a ball cap. "Drop the charges." Last warning, the note read in block letters. My throat tightened, then cooled. I memorized the curve of their sneakers, a glint of a snake tattoo near one wrist, and the outline of a late-model Dodge idling behind them. Noted I murmured to no one, every detail engraving itself in memory. We eased backward through Vera's door. I dialed 911 voice level and precise description plate, partial direction of travel. While Isolde waited in the interior hallway, I photographed the note with timestamps and uploaded it to my secure drive. Years of police work guided each motion, no rush, no wasted step. Within minutes, blue lights swept the street. Captain Leora arrived first, her patrol units fanning out with practiced efficiency. Officers collected the note with gloved hands and copied Vera's porch cam footage to a secure drive. Floodlights sliced across the alley while neighbors peeked from behind curtains. The hum of radios and the crunch of boots replaced the cicadas. Leora gathered a small knot of neighbors under Vera's awning. "If you see the sedan again, call this direct line," she said, handing out cards. I passed around my own contact number and a QR link Arthur had created for anonymous tips. The circle of familiar faces, worried but steady, felt like a quiet barricade. Near midnight, the sedan returned, headlights cutting a slow arc. It paused at the corner, met the bright wash of a patrol spotlight, then glided away without a sound. I stood on Vera's porch, coffee cooling in my hand, and watched the blue lights dance across the pecan trunks. Calm settled in, but it was the kind you borrow, never own. Morning would demand a different kind of answer. Dawn seeped through the kitchen curtains in a thin gray wash. I sipped coffee gone lukewarm and documented every detail from the night before the sedan's plate. Partial the men's shoes and tattoos, the exact time the porch camera caught them dropping the note. Vera arrived in her robe holding a flash drive of the footage. Together we reviewed each frame, pausing on the faint reflection of their car in the streetlight. Upstairs, Isolde practiced our safe word Juniper, her voice steady. The quiet hum of the refrigerator felt almost too loud, a reminder that peace was only borrowed. By 6, Captain Leora Dane stepped into the kitchen, her badge clipped low and casual. She set a fresh notepad on the table. "We draw them out," she said. outlining a simple trap: keep the neighborhood routine normal while unmarked cruisers circle out of sight. I agreed without hesitation. Years of policing had taught me that stillness could be bait if you paired it with preparation. Isolde, listening from the doorway, gave a sharp nod. "We're ready," she said, and I believed her. Outside, the block stirred awake as unmarked cars settled like quiet sentries at each corner. Vera's porch camera streamed live to the sheriff's command center. I moved through a calm domestic routine, watering plants, setting out recycling while noting each passing car. The air smelled of dew and faint diesel, the sky just turning peach. Beneath the ordinary morning sounds, tension threaded like wire. Just after sunrise, the familiar dark sedan glided back slow as a predator. Two men slipped from the alley's shadow. My pulse quickened, but my hands stayed still on the watering can. Blue lights erupted from 3 directions at once. Officers converged with crisp commands. The men froze under the sudden blaze of spotlights. No one fired a shot. I stepped forward only to confirm their faces: same sneakers, same snake tattoo. The folded note from last night was already bagged as evidence when an officer guided them into separate cruisers. At the sheriff's office an hour later, I signed affidavits detailing each threat, while Arthur Keene filed motions for upgraded protective orders and felony intimidation charges against Garrick. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I pressed my pen into each signature line, each stroke sealing another layer of protection. Relief spread through me like a cautious tide. By mid-morning, the neighborhood gathered under Vera's porch awning. Captain Leora explained the rotating watch schedule and handed out a direct report phone line. I thanked each neighbor for their vigilance, passing around my own contact cards. The sense of shared resolve was almost tangible, a quiet wall of solidarity. With the sun climbing and the patrol cars rolling away, I felt the siege lift like mist. Yet deep inside, I knew Garrick was still out there, the real reckoning still to come. Morning sunlight spilled across my porch as I set 2 mugs of coffee on the table, one for Arthur, one for me. The air felt lighter than it had in weeks, carrying only the scent of pecan trees and fresh-cut grass. Inside, Isolde hummed while sorting mail, her voice calm instead of wary. Arthur spread out the legal papers we'd finalized today. "Today we close the loop," he said, tapping the protective order. I breathed in the quiet, letting the weight of the past night settle into something manageable, something already fading. By mid-morning, we were at the Bexar County Courthouse. Polished marble floors echoed with the steady click of my shoes. I kept my breathing, even rehearsing the brief statement I would deliver. Garrick arrived in cuffs, his lawyer, whispering sharply as the district attorney outlined the plea deal: full restitution, a permanent restraining order, and a confession that spared Isolde the ordeal of a trial. When the judge asked if I had a statement, I rose and read the words I'd practiced, clear, steady, unsentimental. I told the court that silence could be strength, that we had lived through fear, but refused to live in it. Garrick stared at the floor. He never looked up. Outside the courthouse, neighbors waited with quiet smiles. Vera hugged Isolde, who for the first time in months let herself smile without shadow. Selene stepped forward, eyes bright with relief. "He can't hurt anyone now," she said softly. Arthur exchanged a glance with me that said more than any speech we had done exactly what we set out to do. As the sun began to dip, I walked the San Antonio Riverwalk alone. The water caught the orange glow of evening, rippling like liquid bronze. I thought of my late husband's favorite saying, "Strength speaks when words fall silent." His presence felt close in the hush between cicada calls. I let the sounds of the river carry the last of my anger downstream. Night settled as I returned home. I locked the new deadbolt, lit a single candle, and opened my journal. The words came easily. Silence is not weakness. It's power lived out loud. I set down the pen, feeling a deep, unshakable calm. Before bed, I phoned Vera and Captain Leora to thank them. Then I stepped onto the porch. Stars pricked the dark Texas sky while the house behind me stood secure and still. I breathed in the warm night air, not as a survivor, but as the keeper of my own peace. Looking back on every sleepless night, I've learned that silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Justice comes when we gather our proof, trust our allies, and refuse to be intimidated. If my story teaches anything, it's that ordinary people can stand tall against fear and protect the ones they love. What about you? Have you faced a moment when quiet strength spoke louder than anger? Share your thoughts in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, or simply type 1 if this story touched your heart. And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life journeys of resilience and family courage, please subscribe to the channel so we can walk the next story together.